Imagine standing on the borders of the civilized world in the early 13th century. If you looked out at the Asian steppes, you really wouldn't see a superpower in the making.
No, not at all.
You'd see, what looks like a chaotic, hopeless mess. Just a scatter of rival clans living in these felt tents, constantly fighting over grazing land.
Right.
And with absolutely no cities, no agriculture, and, it seemed like no future. To the great emperors of China or the sultans of Persia, these people were barely a footnote.
They're just barbarians.
Exactly. Barbarians. Too poor to be worth conquering and way too disorganized to ever be feared. But then the whole picture just shifts almost in an instant.
It's terrifying.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
You realize that what the rest of the world just dismissed as poverty was actually a lethal form of efficiency. While these established empires were bogged down by massive supply trains and incompetent aristocrats ruling by birthright, these nomads were doing something truly revolutionary. They were moving entire armies hundreds of kilometers in just days, surviving on almost nothing.
And this is the real shocker.
This is the most shocking part. They were promoting generals based on pure talent, not their last name. That sudden jarring realization that the primitive outsider is actually more disciplined, more meritocratic than the civilized empire. That's where this story really begins.
It's so much more than an invasion.
It wasn't just an invasion. It was a total reconfiguration of how power worked. So how did a boy born into the violent poverty of the steppe, armed with nothing but a desire for survival, end up shattering the walls of the world's oldest civilizations to build the largest contiguous land empire in history?
That is the perfect vantage point to start this deep dive. We are looking at a geopolitical transformation so sudden, so comprehensive, it still shocks historians today.
Right.
The empire that Genghis Khan founded, the Yek Mongol Ulis, or the Great Mongol Nation, it didn't just conquer territory, it installed these systemic advantages that allowed it to govern and, persist for far longer than anyone could have predicted.
So it wasn't just luck or brute force.
Not at all. The historical material is clear. This success wasn't just a stroke of military genius. It was a series of calculated, really innovative structural decisions. And our mission today is to unpack those mechanisms.
Okay, so where do we start?
Well, we see this immense success resting on, I'd say, three major pillars. First, their truly revolutionary organizational model, which was all centered on this radical idea of meritocracy.
Right. Talent over birthright.
Exactly. Second, the creation of the Pax Mongolica, this stable, unified superhighway across Eurasia that fostered just unprecedented connectivity. And third, the profound and rapid acceleration of technological transfer, which was really powered by the Great Khanate sophisticated administration when they governed China.
So we're diving into how this highly organized functional network emerged from the chaos.
That's it, from the chaos of the steppe.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with that foundational difference. Leadership. When Genghis Khan began his rise, the rulers of established empires, from feudal Europe to the ancient dynasties in Asia, they were governed by an accident of birth.
Completely. Your generals were aristocrats.
Right. The Mongol system just broke that fundamental historical rule. How radical was Genghis Khan's implementation of meritocracy compared to the systems he was just tearing down?
It was a fundamental rejection of, everything, of the entire aristocratic order that dominated political and military life across the globe. Meritocracy, as the Mongols practiced it, was a brutal, almost Darwinian system.
How so?
Advancement was based purely on demonstrated ability, on talent, on real-world performance, lineage, social class, tribal affiliation, all of that was explicitly secondary, if not totally irrelevant.
And we can trace this directly back to Genghis Khan's own life, can't we?
Absolutely. It comes right from his own harrowing origins.
Tell us about that, because this wasn't some, philosophical theory he came up with. It came from profound necessity, didn't it?
100%. He was born Temujin, and his early life was just marked by extreme hardship. His father was murdered, his family was abandoned by their own clan, and they were reduced to absolute poverty, surviving on roots, scavenging. He even spent time as a slave, constantly fleeing violence.
So survival was everything.
It was everything. And that experience, it instilled in him two core non-negotiable beliefs. First, that survival depended on unwavering loyalty. And second, that loyalty was completely useless without absolute competence.
He saw the alternative firsthand.
He saw the weakness of relying on incompetent, squabbling hereditary elites. That was the state of the feuding Mongol tribes he eventually had to unite. His system wasn't designed for comfort or tradition. It was designed purely for optimal performance and unified command.
And you can see that pragmatic design most clearly in the spine of the empire, the army. How did that famous decimal system ensure this machine stayed efficient and merit-based?
The decimal system was revolutionary precisely because it was standardized and, critically, non-tribal. Every single man was organized into these precise, universally recognizable units, regardless of where he came from.
So the Arban.
Right, the Arban of 10 soldiers, the Jakhun of 100, the Mingen of 1,000, and then the core fighting unit, the Tumen of 10,000.
And when you compare that to a typical European army at the time.
Oh, there's no comparison. A medieval army was a patchwork. You'd have local barons showing up with their own retinues, all of varying quality and questionable loyalty. The Mongol structure was like an early exercise in standardized military logistics.
So it guaranteed clear communication.
Seamless communication and crystal clear command structures, sometimes across thousands of miles.
So once you have that modular structure in place, how did Genghis Khan make sure that the commanders leading those modules were actually the best people for the job?
By enforcing promotions strictly based on performance and by deliberately breaking up old tribal ties. He would move commanders across different tumen and promote individuals from the lowest ranks if they showed tactical brilliance or courage.
With, as the sources say, little or no regard to tribal connections.
Exactly. It was a deliberate act of political engineering. If a commander failed, or if his unit didn't perform, he was immediately demoted or, more often than not, executed.
Wow.
This constant upward pressure created a culture of fierce competition and total focus on the mission. A commander's competence was his only political currency.
And that competence was backed up by this almost unbelievable level of discipline, the whole collective accountability thing.
Yeah.
How did that guarantee the army operated like a single organism on the battlefield?
This is maybe the system's most ruthless, but also its most effective feature.
Yeah.
The principle was simple. Your actions affect everyone around you.
So if one soldier ran,
If a single soldier retreated from a charge without explicit orders, his entire Arban, his squad of 10, faced execution.
the whole squad.
The whole squad. And if the Arban retreated, the Jakhun of 100 faced the consequences. This just eliminated individual cowardice. It ensured that every soldier was personally invested in the discipline and bravery of his comrades.
Which means on the battlefield.
Yeah. It meant their complex maneuvers, especially those famous, highly risky feigned retreats designed to lure enemies into an ambush.
Right?
They were executed with breathtaking precision. No one dared break ranks because the cost was just too high, not just for them, but for their immediate friends.
It's like turning the entire army into a single, utterly committed machine. But ruling an empire this big, it needs more than just military dominance. It needs political stability. How did he secure the loyalty of these powerful new generals he'd just created?
That's where the Keshig, the Imperial Guard, comes in. This elite unit served a brilliant dual function.
Okay.
So yes, on one hand, they were the bodyguards for the Great Khan, highly trained, immensely loyal, at the absolute apex of military prestige. But more importantly, they were a profound political loyalty mechanism.
That worked.
They specifically recruited the sons of regional commanders and newly promoted warlords.
So a powerful general's son is essentially living under the Great Khan's roof.
Precisely. If your son, the heir to your influence, is serving in the Keshig, getting the best training, living in luxury, but ultimately residing right next to the Great Khan,
It makes you think twice about rebelling.
it dramatically reduces the likelihood of that general rebelling in his distant province. The Keshig ensured the political center stayed secure by holding the next generation of leadership in close proximity. It fostered loyalty and secured the empire from the internal strife that plagued nearly every other state at the time.
And here's where the pragmatism gets really interesting, because it shifts from internal organization to external expansion. They didn't just promote talent from within, they absorbed talent from the people they conquered.
Yes, this wasn't just about conquest. It was about acquisition and technological integration.
It's the ultimate differentiator.
It is. The Mongols understood they were excellent at war and mobility, but they lacked the sedentary technical skills you need for long-term governance and, well, for conquering fortified cities.
So they had standing orders during campaigns.
Yes, even during the most brutal campaigns, the most horrific massacres, Mongol forces had standing orders to identify and round up specialists.
What kind of specialist are we talking about?
We're talking about a whole catalog of essential non-nomadic skills. Craftsmen, translators, doctors, astronomers, mathematicians, and especially engineers.
Because siege warfare was their initial weakness.
It was a huge weakness. Their nomadic heritage made them superb in open-field cavalry battles, but they were almost useless against fortified cities at first. They couldn't effectively build or operate siege equipment.
So they learned.
They learned by absorbing the technical expertise of settled societies, Persians, Chinese, Central Asians. Engineers were forced to build catapults, trebuchets, and siege towers using local materials for the very next campaign.
That's incredible.
Within a single generation, the Mongols transformed from masters of the horse archer to highly effective siege warriors, incorporating artillery and tactics that were far superior to many of their European or Middle Eastern rivals.
So that system, ruthlessly promoting ability and absorbing external talent, no matter where it came from, it provided this efficient governance and military success that left a deep, enduring mark.
But an organizational blueprint alone that can't hold the largest contiguous land empire in history together.
Oh, you need infrastructure.
You need infrastructure.
And that infrastructure was the Pax Mongolica, the sheer scale of the empire.
Yeah.
You're talking about a relatively small Mongol ruling class and military governing hundreds of millions of people. Force alone was just unsustainable.
You needed stability.
You needed stability, predictable laws, and critically, mobility. The Pax Mongolica, the Mongol Peace, which spanned roughly the mid-13th to mid-14th centuries, it was perhaps the most consequential geopolitical event of the era.
Why is it often called the onset of global history?
Because for the very first time, vast, previously isolated territories were unified under a single overarching authority.
Before the Mongols, the routes connecting Asia to the Middle East and Europe, the Silk Road, they were constantly disrupted. You had dozens, maybe hundreds of petty principalities, each imposing tariffs, fighting small wars, harboring bandits.
Crossing that dangerous territory was a huge risk.
An extraordinary risk. It restricted trade to mainly small volumes of very high-value luxury goods.
And the Mongols just eliminated all those competing interests.
Exactly. They recognized that trade was the lifeblood of their economy. It facilitated the flow of tribute and luxury goods that the ruling elite needed. So security became a core trade policy.
It's just good business.
It's just good business. By uniting Eurasia and maintaining this pervasive military presence along the trade paths, they guaranteed protection for travelers and merchants. And this dramatic reduction in risk and transaction costs was critical for opening up long-distance trade to a degree that was unprecedented.
And the nervous system of this whole unified state, the logistical marvel that made all this security and communication possible, that was the Yam System.
The Yam System, often called the medieval Pony Express, and it's just a testament to their logistical genius. It was initially devised purely for military and official communications.
So the Khan's decrees could travel quickly.
Unimaginably quickly. It allowed the great Khan's decrees or news from the front lines to travel across the entire continent in a matter of weeks, not months or years.
How extensive was this network physically? I mean, maintaining that many way stations and horses seems like an administrative impossibility for the 13th century.
The scale is astronomical. We're talking about a vast state-supported network of roads, often paved or well-maintained, with postal stations strategically placed about every 20 to 30 miles.
This was basically the maximum endurance of a horse at a gallop.
Precisely. And these stations weren't just stables. They were large, often handsome buildings. They functioned as hostels or way stations, providing food, shelter, and most crucially, fresh, rested horses.
And the numbers are staggering.
The estimates suggest the network maintained over 300,000 horses at any given time and used more than 10,000 of these administrative buildings. An arrow messenger, using this relay system, swapping horses at every station, could cover an astonishing 125 miles a day.
That is faster than many forms of transport well into the 19th century.
Yeah.
And this system wasn't just for official messengers. It was extended to VIP travelers, famously Marco Polo.
Right. Marco Polo's journey from Venice to China is the single best advertisement for the security and efficiency of the Yam. His party traveled under the direct sponsorship of Kublai Khan, and they carried the paisa.
The golden tablet. What did that actually do?
It wasn't just a sign of rank. It was a physical golden tablet, a centralized, standardized passport. It guaranteed immediate, necessary services. The Paisa mandated that local authorities provide protection, fresh horses, escorts, and supplies in all the countries under Mongol authority.
So, in effect, it centralized the sovereignty of travel. A passport issued in Beijing guaranteed your safety in Persia.
Exactly. Without this centralized, unified system of security and logistical support, his journey would have required securing countless individual treaties, paying exorbitant tolls, battling constant threats. It would have been impossible.
The Yam turned a nightmare into a functional journey.
A functional, though still very arduous journey. But it allowed Venetian merchants to reach the heart of China and return alive and wealthy. It demonstrated to Europe that sustained, direct east-west contact was not just possible, but potentially incredibly lucrative.
So this wasn't just about safe travel. This was the mechanism that facilitated the first true direct personal contact between Europe and China, and that fundamentally redefined global relationships.
That is the ultimate takeaway of the Pax Mongolica. Before this period, historians find very little solid evidence of direct trade or personal contact between Europe and China. You had intermediaries, Arab, Persian, Central Asian merchants, but rarely a direct chain.
But once the Mongol peace took hold, that changed.
It changed radically. When Marco Polo arrived in Kumbaluk, which is modern-day Beijing, he noted the vast suburbs that were dedicated to lodging foreign merchants. He described separate inns for specific European groups, one for Lombards, another for Germans, a third for Frenchmen.
All there at the same time.
This simultaneous physical presence of traders from across Eurasia, from London to Beijing, proves that a level of global connectivity had been achieved that simply had no precedent in human history.
The Pax Mongolica created the highway, connecting everything. But the source of the most impactful technological flow, the real engine of change, that was located squarely in the east under the sophisticated administration of the great Khanate, the Yuan dynasty in China.
Yes, now the focus shifts to Kublai Khan, Genghis's grandson. He realized that conquering settled societies was one thing, but governing them effectively was a whole different ballgame.
A different skill set entirely.
Completely. In 1271, he formally proclaimed the beginning of the Yuan dynasty and moved his capital to Khanbalik, which is Beijing. He adopted Chinese dynastic traditions, commissioned Chinese-style palaces, and really sought to project his image as the legitimate emperor of China.
And this wasn't just cultural assimilation, was it?
No, it was pragmatic governance. He recognized that stable rule required administrative continuity.
And his administration initiated some pretty significant positive governance measures. It showed a commitment to long-term stability, not just, extraction.
Absolutely. The Yuan administration invested heavily in civil society and social welfare. One remarkable focus was on education and promoting literacy. Mongol records confirm the establishment of an incredible number of public schools.
How many are we talking about?
The records list 20,166 public schools created during Kublai's long reign.
Wow. That's a huge number.
It's massive. And it was necessary to staff the bureaucracy, but it also signaled a real commitment to the well-being and education of the settled population.
And what about economic stability? What measures did they take to protect people from the kinds of natural disasters that constantly plagued agrarian societies?
Kublai instituted a system of, social insurance against crop failures and natural disasters. According to travelers at the time, the policy was clear and far-reaching.
How did it work?
If the people were afflicted by famine or some natural calamity, not only were no taxes exacted for that year, which provided immediate financial relief, but the government would also step in and supply them with essential commodities.
Like food and seed.
Specifically corn for immediate food and seeds for the next planting cycle. This guaranteed essential continuity, preventing internal collapse and mass migration, which in turn ensured the stability of the entire empire.
So it seems like this administrative stability created the perfect environment for the exchange and, the proliferation of technologies that would end up changing the entire world.
That is precisely the point. The Mongol consolidation acted as a kind of highway for secrets, innovations that might have stayed localized in China or taken centuries to trickle across fragmented regions.
Now they traveled rapidly.
They traveled rapidly under the secure, unified umbrella of the empire. And this accelerated the diffusion of Chinese technology westward faster than ever before.
Let's start with the most explosive transfer, gunpowder.
Gunpowder was, of course, a Chinese invention. It had been known for centuries for fireworks and some primitive defensive weapons.
Right.
But through the Mongol network, through captured artisans, diplomatic exchanges, the need for new siege warfare techniques, This black powder was introduced to the Western world.
And that changes everything.
It fundamentally accelerated the history of European warfare. By the early 14th century, Europeans had integrated gunpowder into cannons and fire lances, setting the stage for modern artillery and radically altering defensive architecture across the continent.
And that shift was directly facilitated by the seamless, secure communication channels of the Pax Mongolica.
Directly. Then you have the less violent, but equally profound, transfer of printing technology.
Right.
Printing is another essential example. Woodblock printing was ancient in China, but the need for standardized administrative texts across the vast Yuan Empire spurred its acceleration and spread.
So they set up a dedicated printing office.
A huge one. Kublai's administration established an academy for calendrical studies and this large, dedicated printing office. They mass-produced millions of calendars to standardize time across this multi-ethnic empire, which was an enormous logistical feat.
And this technology spreads?
The technology and the whole concept of paper-based mass production traveled rapidly. This included the crucial innovation of paper money, which arrived in the West in the 13th century, initially baffling and later intriguing European observers.
And beyond technology, the actual physical flow of goods must have transformed European material culture. The sheer volume and variety of luxury goods must have been staggering.
It was a revolution in consumption. Goods like porcelain and raw silk had always been prized, but they were incredibly rare. Under the stability of the Yuan dynasty and the safe routes of the Yam, they started flowing westward in previously unimaginable volumes.
And new goods were introduced too.
Yes, goods that fundamentally altered fashion and textile production in Europe. Fabrics that were previously unknown in the West, like satin, damask silk, and muslin. This influx of high-quality exotic goods increased Europe's demand for East-West trade exponentially.
Which provides the long-term economic motivation for what comes next.
Exactly, for future maritime exploration.
But this transfer wasn't just a one-way street, was it? It was a complex cultural and scientific cross-pollination within the empire, leveraging the Mongols' general policy of religious and intellectual tolerance.
That is a crucial point. The Mongols were remarkably pragmatic. If an idea or a piece of knowledge worked, they adopted it. They didn't care if it came from a Muslim, a Christian, a Buddhist, or a Chinese scholar.
And you see this in medicine.
You see rich exchanges across diverse fields, especially medicine. Muslim doctors who came west with the Mongol armies or traveled on trade routes gained extensive knowledge of Chinese pharmacology and traditional herbal remedies. And conversely, Chinese doctors gained access to sophisticated surgical techniques and anatomical knowledge that was developed in the Middle East.
A fusion of global medical traditions.
It was a single imperial roof, yeah.
And their reliance on sophisticated governance systems meant they were also patrons of the harder sciences, particularly mathematics and astronomy.
Precisely. I mean, to govern and collect taxes across a continent, you need advanced mathematical tools. The Yuan administration heavily relied on innovations from Arabic and Indian mathematics concepts, like the numbers zero and negative numbers were essential for complex accounting.
And they used the abacus.
Clerks across the empire used the abacus for standardized calculations. Kublai Khan's libraries were centers of global knowledge. Critically, they included copies of the Wuhuli II, which is Euclid's Elements, brought to the East by Muslim mathematicians.
So foundational Western and Hellenistic science was being studied in Beijing.
That's right.
You mentioned astronomy. This scientific exchange extended far beyond simple translation, didn't it? It even influenced the European Renaissance centuries later.
This is one of the most fascinating examples of this Mongol-era cross-pollination, the massive investment in astronomy. Kublai's brother, Hulagu Khan, commissioned the establishment of the Maraga Observatory in Persia.
And this was a major scientific institution.
One of the most advanced of its time. It was under the direction of the polymath Nasir al-Din al-Tusi. This observatory housed an estimated 400,000 books and involved scholars from all across the empire, including Chinese astronomers working right alongside Persian and Arab scholars.
And what was the key innovation that emerged there?
Well, al-Tusi, working in this Mongol-funded observatory, developed a brilliant mathematical model that we now know as the Tusi couple. This model described linear motion as the sum of two circular motions, and it was designed to improve the accuracy of the old Ptolemaic model of planetary movement. Critically, these innovations didn't stay in Persia.
They travel.
Byzantine Greek astronomers, like Gregory Cherniades, traveled and studied at the Ilkhanate, the Mongol successor state in Persia. and they brought back these crucial astronomical innovations to Europe.
Including the two-sea couple itself.
Exactly, which directly influenced future Western scientific thought, including Copernicus. So the Mongols were literally funding the scientific infrastructure that would eventually help kickstart the Renaissance.
This empire didn't just connect the world physically and technologically. They fundamentally innovated the financial mechanisms of globalization. They invented new ways to finance and manage this unprecedented scale of global trade.
That's right. The Mongols were brilliant pragmatists when it came to wealth generation. As a military ruling class, they needed agents to conduct business, so they relied heavily on foreign merchants, Central Asians, Arabs, Persians, Europeans, as their financial conduits.
And to maximize trade, they developed the Ortok system.
The Ortok system, which is strikingly similar to the modern limited partnership structure.
That sounds like a concept that's centuries ahead of its time. How did it specifically mitigate risk and incentivize trade?
Well, before the Ortok system, a trade partnership often meant the merchant put up all the capital for a venture. If the caravan was lost to bandits, weather, war, that single merchant or investor would be completely financially ruined.
Which limits how much trade can happen.
Exactly. The high-risk restricted participation and trade volume. The Ortok system changed the rules. It allowed the principal investors, often wealthy Mongols, to provide the majority of the capital, but their liability was legally capped at the original investment amount.
So if a $10,000 caravan was lost, the investor only lost their initial $10,000, not their entire personal wealth.
Precisely. By spreading the risk among multiple limited partners, the system generated enormous confidence in long-distance trade. Merchants, knowing a single catastrophic loss wouldn't annihilate them, were willing to finance more ventures and take on greater distances.
It pumped capital and confidence into the network.
Rapidly.
And the source of much of this capital came from a really unlikely and highly powerful source: Mongol women.
This is one of the most unique aspects of Mongol society. Unlike in most sedentary civilizations where women's roles were highly restricted, Mongol men traditionally focused on warfare, hunting, and religious rites.
So the women handled the money.
The women, particularly the wives and mothers of the ruling elite, were the ones who managed money, supervised wealth, and accumulated goods. They were absolutely central figures in these Ortok partnerships, using the massive spoils of war and empire to buy luxury goods or engage directly in finance.
And their involvement in finance often ignored the established religious prohibitions that governed finance everywhere else in the world.
That's where the power contrast is most dramatic. Both Islamic law and Christian canon law strictly regulated or prohibited usury lending money at interest.
Right.
They often capped rates at very low levels or banned it outright, which restricted the flow of available capital. Mongol women, who were unencumbered by these religious mandates, actively engaged in money lending, and their rates were reportedly astronomical.
How high are we talking?
Often at compound annual rates of 100%.
Wow.
But this influx of available, if expensive, capital flowed rapidly into commercial ventures across the entire network, fueling the expansion of trade precisely because the demand for capital to fund new, high-profit ventures was immense.
This huge focus on commerce led to a profound administrative shift in China itself, which you call the status revolution.
Okay.
It didn't just tolerate merchants, they officially elevated them.
This represents a true revolution in social hierarchy. Under the preceding Song dynasty in China, the social order was rigidly defined. Scholars and officials were at the top, then farmers, then artisans.
And merchants at the bottom.
At the very bottom, often ranked just one step above robbers or vagrants. The Mongols, recognizing the vital necessity of trade to their stability and wealth, officially reversed this historic disdain. They raised the status of merchants to the highest level of all professions, placing them just below government officials.
That's a staggering endorsement of the commercial class. Did that cultural shift stick around?
It did. Even after the Yuan dynasty fell to the native Ming dynasty, the shift persisted. Merchants gained permanent power and respect within Chinese society. The economic focus the Mongols instilled accelerated China's internal economy and trade structure for centuries to come.
Finally, we need to touch on how the sheer size of this empire was administered financially. Through paper currency, an innovation they greatly expanded.
Right. Kublai Khan greatly expanded the use of the zongtongchao paper currency across the entire empire. He was moving beyond regional coinage toward a truly centralized monetary system.
And it was enforced by decree.
Absolutely. It was technically backed by silver or silk, but its acceptance was enforced. Marco Polo noted that refusing to accept this currency was punishable by death. That shows you the immense degree of centralized control and confidence the government demanded in their fiat currency.
How did they manage to maintain the value of this massive paper currency? That's a challenge even for modern governments.
This really shows their administrative sophistication. To maintain the currency's value and prevent rampant inflation, the government employed an early form of centralized monetary policy. They would periodically buy back the paper currency with silver,
Which guarantees its value.
It guaranteed the public that the paper had real tradable value, establishing essential economic confidence and allowing for a truly universal medium of exchange across this vast Eurasian landmass.
So if we look at this entire structure, the Ortok partnerships, the influx of capital, the elevation of merchants, the paper currency, what did this administrative pragmatism ultimately mean for the global economy moving forward?
It created an unprecedented environment of high reward, relatively low risk, long distance trade. The Pax Mongolica generated massive profits for successful traders across Eurasia, and that profoundly whetted the European appetite for Eastern wealth.
So the success proved it was possible.
The successes proved that extraordinary riches were available through East-West contact, but they also highlighted the enormous cost of accessing that trade via the Mongol land route and its numerous middlemen.
So it created a new incentive.
A massive economic incentive. It drove Europeans to seek ways to lower trading costs and, crucially, to find new direct routes to the east, the very impetus that drove the maritime age of exploration, including the voyages of Vasco da Gama and Christopher Columbus. The Mongols' financial infrastructure and commercial success set the foundational stage for the modern, interconnected global economy we live in today. So in final summary, the Mongol Empire, which was forged out of necessity and violence, really succeeded because of a radical organizational efficiency. They systematically prioritized talent over birthright, building the most disciplined, adaptable, and technologically integrated military and administrative force the world had yet seen.
And they took this hyper-efficient meritocratic engine and used it to enforce order across Eurasia, transforming the chaotic, dangerous Silk Road into a vast, protected superhighway of exchange via the Yam System. And this geopolitical unification, which was overseen by the sophisticated administration of the Great Khanate in China, it just reset the clock on global diffusion. It accelerated the transfer of essential technologies, from advanced math and printing to gunpowder and new textiles, and it fundamentally and irreversibly reset the economic and political relationship between East and West.
The legacy is undeniable. It was a unified Eurasian network established through immense violence, but it was one that paved the foundational pathways for future world trade, scientific exchange, and global connectivity, ensuring that the interconnected world of today is the direct result of the unprecedented pathways the Mongols forged.